Councilman Brennan.
Present.
Councilman Harjo.
Present.
Mayor Sykes.
Present. Let the record reflect that we do have a quorum. And before we go down to anything, I would like to make a change to the agenda tonight. I'm going to pull executive session, and then I'd like to pull item 10 on the consent agenda, if council so moved.
Sure.
Mayor.
Councilman Harjo.
I'll make a motion to pull executive session and pull consent item 10. Sorry.
Before I do that, is there any other adjustments to the council agenda? All right. With motion and second, I'll call for the question. Councilwoman Garvey.
Aye.
Councilman Brennan. Councilwoman Workla.
Aye.
Councilman Harjo. Aye. All right. Okay, we're going to run down to recognized persons in the audience. The purpose of this agenda is to provide an opportunity for members of the public to address the City Council on matters that are not listed on this current agenda and are within the subject matter jurisdiction of the municipal purview of the city. Comments may not involve personnel matters, legal disputes, or private non-municipal affairs of the constituency. Comments regarding zoning and land issues may only be made during properly noticed public hearings. Would anybody like to get up and speak? Okay, we're going to go down to conflict of interest. Oh, wait. Go ahead, Ted.
I have a question. It says here an opportunity, not on the current agenda. The frequency change is on the agenda. Will we have an opportunity to speak at that time?
Yeah, I haven't fixed it yet. Been a little under the weather. You can address it. It's been brought up by, I don't know, he's always here.
So address your concern right now, sir.
Yeah, so address it now.
Go
Do I
ahead.
have to address it now, or can I address it as part of the
No,
discussion?
it will not be, so unless it's a public hearing, it isn't open to the public on an agenda item, so it's appropriate to do it now.
Okay. Ted Thompson. Just a couple of comments, and I know you're going to get presentations, but I wanted to go over a couple of things that were in the packet that was sent to everybody. It appeared to me by looking at that information that virtually everyone acknowledges that there is a frequency congestion at the Mountain Home Airport on 122A. There is disagreement on whether the frequency should be changed now or later, and I'm not going to get into that because that's going to be part of the discussion. I would like to also say that looking at that material, it appears to me that there's a very critical item that's not apparent there, and that's exposure. Those of us who fly daily experience this. Those who do not fly often don't see the nature of the problem. So they're not exposed to this risk, this very real risk that there'll be a frequency transmission that is stepped on and missed that has the potential to lead to a catastrophic accident. There also appears to be unanimous agreement that the weather station is causing the problem. The number was 13% of the transmissions are from that weather station. I would like it turned off. My students are not allowed to use it. I recommended our Civil Air Patrol pilots not use it. There are other sources of weather information that will not jam our frequency. There were also some information there about being on the wrong frequency after a change can lead to a mishap, and I won't dispute that people on the wrong frequency who are in the traffic pattern can cause an accident. Just a month ago, myself and another pilot were flying, and there was a locally based airplane on the wrong frequency that almost ran into another airplane for poisoning. And that's all I've got. Thank you.
Okay. Go down to conflict of interest declaration. Has any council member received information pertaining to or otherwise any contact with any other person regarding any item on the city council? If so, please set forth the nature of contact. All right, none. Run down the consent agenda. Is there anything that council would like to pull, have more clarification on, other than item 10 that got pulled? motion to approve the consent agenda as printed, pulling item 10.
Mayor,
Councilman Harjo.
make a motion to approve the consent agenda as printed with the exception of pulling item 10 as previously stated.
It's been motioned and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing
Mayor.
Councilwoman Workla.
Yeah, sorry, I'm in the process of messaging Cindy right now.
I see.
Just help me here. So it looks like all the civic groups had their updates made in red. I didn't see that though for number 8 on the consent agenda, for the Not Home Historical Society. Am I missing something there?
It's not on there, and I'm trying to look.
Hang on 1 second.
Thank you.
I have made them. I don't know why they're not in red.
She said that she has made them, and for some reason she doesn't know why they're not in red.
I have the exact same.
Okay, I also read through it. I didn't see the changes
Yeah.
about the biannual reporting and stuff like that as well. So maybe I got it back off or something, but I read through there's nothing highlighted there. I did read through it and I didn't see anything about the reporting,
Council,
Matthew.
Mayor. Councilwoman, the language for the Historical Society on the copy I have in front of me in this room, which doesn't help you,
Okay,
has the exact same language as the other agreements do.
okay,
Other than it does reflect MHH as the Historical Society. That's the only difference between them all.
okay, perfect. Thanks so much.
Okay.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. Councilwoman Workla.
Hi.
Councilman Harjo. Aye. Councilwoman Garvey.
Aye.
Councilman Brennan. Aye. We'll run down to old business, action item deliberation decision proposed land increase for Mellon Water District. Council, what do you want to do?
Mayor,
Councilman Harjo.
in reading through the updated lease agreement, or the updated lease and agreement for that, we have noted the next 30 years as the duration, an initial 30-year lease period throughout. The rent reflects, as the council requested previously, to start at 5.5 and have a 5% increase through each year of the duration of the contract. That is all in as we expected. There are some factors that need to be finalized still. The specification of the cost of the meter, as we have discussed for that branch of our water system. I think this captured everything except for those portions. Oh, and the 1.5 times current city water rate per gallon at the time of the emergency water service request. According to the notes that I have, I think that covers everything that we discussed in what we desired out of updated language.
Councilman Brennan.
Question under paragraph 2, which is the rent amount. The final, I guess the second half of the final sentence of this paragraph says, unless otherwise agreed to in writing. Paul, I'm going to direct that at you. Unless otherwise agreed to in writing by both parties. Good or bad in there, like, I'd like to see it locked in, but I guess that would be maybe not as able to do that.
Sorry, I wasn't following. I'm trying to find it. Oh, I see. Well, it sets how the rent will go up year after year. I think the catch-all, unless otherwise agreed to, is if both parties recognize that the 5% is, I'm assuming it's just supposed to be sort of covering the cost of inflation and those types of things. And inflation goes up 11%, very like, hey, again, it creates an illegality if the present citizenry has to subsidize another subdivision. It would make it avoidable as opposed to void contract, and so we would say unless otherwise agreed to by the parties for that. Conversely, if inflation is only 1%, then are we overcharging them for that benefit? So I like having the catch-all. That's somewhat vague. If it didn't have the 5% written in the sentence preceding that, then I would agree with you that it's a vague mechanism of increasing the rent. But given that there's what the current rent is, how much it goes up per year, but hey, other things happen because of the calculation of how we're doing this now. So it makes sense.
All right, council. Council Garvey?
Since we still have the section under 7, the installation of the water meter device, shall we just go ahead and keep it under old business? This is an action item. I guess I'm not sure which action we're looking for tonight, since we still have some things that need to be finalized. I mean, the rest looks great.
Go ahead.
I just need the size of meter and the specific type to put in there. That way they can purchase it. That was discussed in the last meeting, and I was still pending that from Dave. The district has already got this copy to review themselves to proceed forward. So for their sake of DEQ and funding, I think a vote tonight pending the meter size is all I'm seeking.
Yeah, that's what I was asking. Okay, well then I will make a motion to approve the proposed land lease with Mellon Water District pending the water meter specs to be inserted once it's finalized under paragraph number 7.
Second. It's been motioned and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. Councilman Garvey? Councilman Brennan?
Aye.
Councilman Harjo?
Aye.
Councilwoman Workla?
Aye.
All right, going down to new business, items removed from consent agenda. There was only one, but it's tabled. So we're gonna run down to new business, non-action I'm discussing regarding frequency congestion. And I have a AJ Lewis and a Martin Pike coming down.
What do you need me to do, Councilman?
Sorry.
So as Councilman Harjo's popping that up, welcome. Nice to see you. It's always good to see you guys. Haven't seen you forever. So I guess we'll go down here. Whoever wants to start, I guess I'm gonna assume it's you, AJ, to start
Yes,
out.
sorry. Big personality, but thank you very much for taking the time out of your busy day to come here with us. I'm AJ Lewis. I'm a member of your Airport Advisory Committee. I'm here with Martin Pike. We wanted to talk to you guys about some of the problems that we've been having with the common traffic advisory frequency out of the Mountain Municipal Airport. Next slide, please. As I'm sure is going to come as a complete shock to all of you, for the last 6 to 7 months at the Airport Advisory Committee, most of our conversations have been dominated about congestion out of the CTAF frequency and whether or not it has gotten to the point where we need to entertain a frequency change for the airport that's operating out of there. We have discussed it at length, and unfortunately our committee has not been able to come to a unified, common agreement as to what we think the appropriate sort of action is going. So we decided that since we are an advisory committee only, what we wanted to do was put this problem in front of you as city council and mayor, who are the airport sponsors, and obviously the decision makers for the city, and see if there was a direction that you guys wanted us to run with, and make sure that we got this in front of you as a safety mechanism for the board that's out there. Next slide, please. So currently, your airport runs on CTAF frequency 122.8. This is arguably the most common advisory frequency for general aviation airports that exist out there. As such, we have a lot of airports that surround Mountain Home that also use this frequency, and they make it so that when you have an aircraft that's in the pattern at Mountain Home Municipal Airport, they're hearing traffic calls and radio calls by pilots that are not intended for Mountain Home. So, for example, you can have aircraft that's getting ready to depart from our airport, and they're hearing calls from airports as far away as McCall. Obviously, some of that congestion has led some airport users to feel that it's time to change the frequency so that we can get away from some of that congestion that's going on out there. So there are some pros to changing the frequency. If we go to the next slide, please. Oh, sorry. Before we get there, this is just a reminder. I'm sure most of you saw it, but there was a time where I did a frequency analysis out at Mountain Municipal Airport just to see how great the congestion was going. I monitored 122.8 for a period of 8 non-consecutive days, and got about 1,000 radio calls that occurred over there. I went through each one individually to determine where that radio call was intended to go for and mapped it out. And this is kind of just giving you an idea of where people at Mountain Home are hearing other radio traffic coming from. So you're getting Ontario, McCall, Gooding, Jerome, Twin Falls, and the 2 airports that are in existence between us and Boise that are out there. So obviously because of these traffics are being out there, we do have those airport users that are suggesting it might be time for new frequency change. The way that our committee decided it would be best to present this to you is in a non-biased manner, where you had one person who would present the pros for the frequency change, one person who would present the cons for the frequency change, and both of us would be here to answer questions to the best of our ability should you have any at the end. Martin decided that he'll go ahead and represent the pros for the frequency change, so I'll let him talk about some of the reasons why frequency change would be prudent and what his thoughts are on it.
Well, we can start off at the top of the list, reducing congestion here at our own local airport. If we don't have to listen to the other surrounding airports, you know, we have our frequency to ourselves. If we can get away from the 122.8, that would get us off that advisory frequency for the weather. And that was stated that took up about 13% of our traffic calls, so that would get that off the 13% of the radio use off the traffic frequency if we would change to a different frequency for traffic. And the situational awareness, when you're not having to, when you can listen to only people in your traffic pattern versus the traffic pattern in Jerome and Gooding, which is the ones I hear the most, you know, I can keep track better of the people that I'm sharing the pattern with here at Mountain Home. And emergency reliability for critical situation, that kind of speaks for itself. You're on a party line, and you're trying to make a call out, and you can't because someone else has got it tied up. You know, you're kind of stuck. And some of the things he doesn't have up there is we do a lot of chatter on our frequency here because we have a lot of training going on here. We have a flight school out at the airport now, and they're out there a lot. And people come over from, you know, with the helicopters out of Caldwell, and I've seen flight schools out of Boise and Napa over here, and they are using our airport, so they increase, you know, our radio frequency, traffic on our radio frequency. So Jerome and Gooding, they have to listen to us. And I've been on a flight going into Jerome, and I can't talk to a pilot leaving Jerome because I'm competing with Mountain Home. You know, the radio frequency is crowded with Mountain Home traffic, and I can't talk to a guy coming out of Jerome. And I really wanted to talk to him. He did not have the ADS-B where I could see him on my screen, so I knew he couldn't see me. and it would have been really nice to talk to him, and I couldn't do it. I think just being a good neighbor, you know, changing the frequency would help these other airports with traffic frequency congestion. Traffic frequency congestion too. It's kind of a two-way street. We help ourselves, but we also help them. And that's what I've got.
Councilman Brennan? Can I jump in, like, before we go to the other half and ask a couple questions?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
You mentioned by changing it, it would be a frequency of our own. It wouldn't be shared by any other airports in the area?
From what I understand, the frequency they have available would be unique to Mountain Home, and we would not be sharing it.
Okay. And then, maybe a dumb question. As far as all of our military aircraft here, is it any effect on them of us having a different frequency?
No, because we do not talk to them. And any, you know, the military helicopters that do approaches into Mountain Home, they would just have to go to our frequency.
You advertise that on like a NOTAM or something?
It'd be on a NOTAM, yes.
Okay. And then, again, sorry for other dumb questions. I think of the radio I use on the ground all the time. And the higher altitude I get, the more clarity I have. If your aircraft are on the runway, are you having the congestion there, or do you have to get the aircraft up high in the sky to have the congestion?
It does make a difference. I have been on the ground where I can, you know, because it is a line of sight. And, you know, so if I'm on the ground and they're in the air at Jerome, I can hear them talking. If they're on the ground in Jerome, I probably cannot hear them talking. And vice versa. You know, when we're in the air here, they can hear us.
So the congestion, if I'm hearing you right, the congestion is worse when you're in the sky.
Yes.
You have that,
Right.
the range, I suppose. Okay. And then my question for the military thing was more specific, I guess, was if we have an aircraft starting to enter like controlled airspace or whatever, their tower, that's you, right, can know our frequency and say get out of here without having to like slow down the process?
The procedure separating general aviation aircraft from military aircraft would not be affected by the frequency change at all. It would be transparent to the military, and safety would not be degraded at all.
Okay. That's all for now. Thank you.
All right, next slide, please. So we'll jump into some of the other sides of the argument. One of the biggest one is that there is a period of adaptation if we do a frequency change. The risk where some pilots may come in using the old Unicom frequency, even though we have a new one published, either because they're using outdated charts, they're unfamiliar with the area. There's a variety of reasons where they come in. Obviously, you can imagine that would create a safety issue in and of itself if you have aircraft operating on one frequency, thinking they're talking to aircraft on the ground, but they're actually on a separate frequency, and you're kind of running two frequencies simultaneously. So there is an adaptation period that must be considered when you run into that. There's a lot of the request for the FAA in and of itself to make the frequency change doesn't cost anything, but there is a small cost that will be associated with it. We do have signage out at the airport that dictates what the Unicom frequencies are. Those will have to be updated. Any mention of the Unicom frequencies on the city website or papers that you hand off to anybody building hangars, any of that literature would also have to be updated and scrubbed to make sure that it is most accurate. You wouldn't want to create a situation where the city is advertising the old Unicom frequency on a new Unicom frequency, and that could cause a problem. Obviously, it does require some lead time with the FAA. It doesn't just happen instantaneously. We would have to interact with them, and during that time, things will operate just as they continuously are. Right now, one of the bigger ones that we're talking about is there's a possibility of congestion on the new frequency. So the goal is to get a Unicom frequency that would be specific to Mount Home and Mount Home traffic only. If they wanted to do that, there's no guarantee that we would be able to do that. The FAA would have to do a frequency analysis and determine which one is best based on where we are, which frequencies are available. There was a spectrum analysis done. I want to say MIT, I don't remember for sure. I will find the study and I will email it to you at the end of this. That determined there's something like 9 to 12 really usable, common CFAP frequencies that are available throughout the U.S. So finding one that won't encroach on somebody else would have to be done. And then there is, of course, the problem with some people might not like the new frequency that's going on. It's trivial, but it's a factor that's out there. The best way that I can equate it is imagine we're all Idaho residents. We all have phones with area code 208. and all of a sudden Idaho implements a second area code, and you end up with a 864 area code while everybody else has 208. It doesn't really mean anything, but it is kind of irritating that you have a separate frequency, so you could end up with one of these weird CTAP frequencies that has some like .0753 trailing number in there. The last one is there is some concern that it may cause increased workload for overflight traffic. What I mean by that is, imagine you have an aircraft that's flying the entire southeast corridor of Idaho in their route to Utah, and they're passing all of these airports. So they're passing the air parks that are out there by Boise, they're passing over Mount Home, they're passing over Jerome, they're passing over Gooding on their way to Utah. Right now, they can dial up 122.8, and they can listen to traffic from every single aircraft, from every single airport en route that they may be a factor with, and not have to make multiple frequency changes throughout there. Putting that one frequency change in the middle does increase workload for pilots as they're transitioning to the southeast corridor of Idaho, if that makes sense. These are just some of the cons that we came up with. Do you have any specific questions about those?
Mayor?
Go ahead, Councilman Workla.
Thank you. So I just want to ask for, you gave the example of, so before you pick up a phone and you call a number and the area code is changed, you don't do like a pre-flight or a pre-checklist before you dial a phone number, right? So as a pilot, isn't checking NOTAM part of your pre-flight planning?
1000% yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mistakes happen.
So my only question is so if I'm flying, which I don't, from Twin to Ontario, they all have the same frequency.
Not every airport. Just in the southeast corridor that we're talking about, all those airports that you saw on the chart, they all have that same frequency. Every airport doesn't all have the same Unicom frequency. They do try to do a spectrum separation, where they make it so that you don't have too much congestion going on in one area, but it's inevitable in a small area like this where you will have multiple airports operating on the same frequency. Some pilots like that as it enables them to minimize their workload while they're in flight.
Okay. And then the airport manager from, let's say, Jerome, Twin, Ontario, Fayette, Caldwell. But I remember seeing something in our packet, not our packet, but that they're all in a consensus it doesn't need to be changed, or it does. Is that correct?
As we get into the presentation, I do bring up some of the extended research that members of the advisory committee did and some of them talking. Let's get to it real quick just to
Well,
simply answer your question.
then I'll be quiet and let's just keep going with your presentation. I'm sorry, AJ.
No, not at all. It's yeah.
You mentioned about there's no guarantee of what frequency we would get. Can you do that analysis before the city decides to make the switch to see how private that frequency would be or how congested it might be?
I don't know. We would have to reach out to the FAA to initiate the spectrum analysis, and we can talk to them about what that entails and whether or not we can figure out what their Unicom frequency would be, what they would recommend before we go in there.
Okay.
Next slide, please. In your packet, I sent you a bunch of NTSB reports, National Transportation Safety Boards, about real-world consequences and risk that happen with frequency changes or lack thereof. This was just an attempt to kind of highlight to you the real-world risk that's associated with any action that you may take. Aviation, like any other safety organization, is always trying to mitigate our risk as low as we can, but you'll never be able to get it zero. These examples from Dunkirk, New York, Florida, and more Florida, all represent times where frequency congestion or a frequency misuse represented either a mishap as the secondary cause or created a mid-air collision. So the first one, you had a pilot that was coming in immediately after the airport had changed frequencies. They had decided that they wanted to get away from the one that they were using and go to one that was more specific to that airport. A pilot was using outdated GPS, came in on the wrong frequency, and ended up clipping wings with another aircraft on the runway. The other one there at the end, Deland, Florida, Embry-Riddle, Aeronautical University was kind of in the area. They had been for years after the city council to change the frequency because they felt that it was too congested. Shortly after they petitioned the city to do that, there was an incident where a pilot missed a call because of frequency congestion, and it resulted in a mid-air collision between those aircraft. While that wasn't the primary cause of the crash, the CTAP frequency congestion was noted as a secondary contributing factor for that thing. Those are just an attempt to highlight to you the risks associated of either action that you decide to take. Leave the frequency the same, change it, there is risks associated with that. Next slide, please.
Did McCall change their frequency and then change it back to where it was?
I'm not sure about McCall. I know in here we talked about it, Gooding at one point changed their frequency. They wanted to get away from, I think it was with Jerome, is what their airport manager said. And like if they ended up going back, they were more worried about the safety implications of staying on the new frequency and then going back to the other one. Going back to the analysis that I did of other airports, this was just to kind of give you, try to, a comparison, an apples comparison to a rural frequency change that had taken place. Up until 2022, Caldwell and Nampa had shared frequencies. They were hearing traffic from both airports, but they had grown so much that Caldwell decided they were going to change their frequency and get on there because it was just too congested for them to do. So to kind of give you an example of when they felt that change was appropriate, I did this straight line propagation where I took the 8 days that I had monitored and I calculated out the median time that pilots spent on the radio speaking, which was about 8 seconds. I then went to the terminal area forecast for the FAA and I extrapolated out for 2022 the total annual operations, and then I used the formula that in your packet to just convert those to hours to find out, based on the number of operations, how many projected annual airtime hours you would have at an airport. So just to give you an example, Caldwell had 147,863 total operations recorded for 2022. And if you use the formula, it equates to about 328.58 annual airtime hours. That's how many times pilots are speaking out there. Again, this is a straight line propagation, so it could be more, it could be less. This is just to do a straight line comparison to all airports. Just to put that in perspective, Mount Holm itself only had 17,000 operations, and that resulted in just under 40 hours of total annual airtime operations. What that means is Nampa and Caldwell together had just under 500 total annual airtime hours for the operations that they had put in there. If you add up everything from all the other airports, with McCall, Gooding, Jerome, Buell, and Ontario, the total airtime hours is only 274. So all those airports together just come to a little bit over half of when the annual airtime hours at Caldwell and Nampa reached the point where the city decided they needed to bid up the frequencies. Does that make sense? Okay. It's very important that I reiterate at this time, the FAA has no benchmark or threshold at which they require a city to change their uniform frequency. That is largely left at the discretion of the airport sponsor and the airport end users when they feel that there's a safety issue that may require a frequency change. So just because Nampa and Caldwell waited until they got to up almost 500 annual airtime hours doesn't mean that we can't do it later, we can't do it sooner. It's just to give you a benchmark of something that happened in southern Idaho of when other neighboring airports decided they had reached the point where they needed to change frequency. Any questions about that? Next slide, please. I believe this is what you were talking about, Mayor. As part of this presentation, some of our members went out and they spoke to other airport managers about the frequency issues. Gooding and Ontario are two airports that you can hear from Mount Holm, so specifically they were the airport managers were asked about that. Mr. Andy Wood, the airport manager for Ontario, said he saw no significant issues with frequency congestion. He thought the greater challenge would be reporting to different users, your BLM, single engine air taxis, your helicopters, your corporate jets, and things. And then Mr. Dale Thompson from Gooding reported he had no significant frequency congestion concerns. They are the ones I think you were talking about, Mr. Mayor. They did try the frequency change, and they did not like it. They reverted back because they felt that there were some safety issues there with being on the other frequency, and so they went back to the other one. He emphasized more common sense radio usage or something like that. Next slide, please. So through all of our back and forth, these are kinds of the three scenarios that we envisioned presenting to you guys and seeing if you had an appetite to pursue one over the other. The other one was to continue to leave the CTAP frequency as it is today. Continue to monitor, or revisit it at a later time, maybe 4 or 5 years down the road to see if our airport has grown any or congestion has gotten any worse where we need to. We can certainly revisit as we need to. The other one is, of course, to reach out to the FAA and request a frequency change. And then the third one that was kind of put on during the 3-minute conversation period was installing a new automated weather observation system, the AWOS. Next slide, please. Just to kind of give you an idea of what we're talking about with that. Out of those almost 1,000 radio transmissions from the analysis that I did, 127 of them were attributed to mic clicking on the radio. Don't know if you know this, but mic clicking on the radio, 3 clicks, is usually used to either activate a weather reporting system so the pilots can get the weather at the airport they're intending landing, or they can use it to adjust airport lighting, things like that. That's a very simplified version of what's going on. So the thought is, since you have almost 13% of the traffic that or the radio traffic that I had observed being attributed to clicking, if we had our own automated weather service that had its own frequency, you could take 13% of the clicking off of the 122.8 frequency, have aircraft do all their weather checks on that frequency, and that would alleviate some of the congestion from our normal frequency for airborne operations for aircraft. Reach out to JUB just to pull some numbers for you if that was something that you wanted to be interested in. The cost of a new AWOS system would be about $350,000. The FAA does have the ability to fund 90% of that, with the city coming in 10%. There is an annual maintenance and testing agreement that would be about $6,500 per year, and you can estimate approximately $2,000 for maintenance and parts. Useful life of an AWOS is about 15 years, and the FAA would expect the city of Mount Holmes to maintain the system for the entirety of that 15-year period.
Councilman Brennan? For the grant match, Chris, is that something that is already part of our equation, or is that a whole different grant?
This would be all.
It would be all new in addition to what we get. Okay.
Next slide, please. All right, so those were our 3 basic areas of thought of what we want to do, either leave the frequency where it is now, kind of revisit, monitor to see if congestion actually does get worse, to go ahead and pursue a frequency change with the FAA, or possibly explore the installation of an AWOS system. Before Martin and I take any of your questions, I had 2 things that I wanted to address just real quick as you guys make the decision. I know that this is a non-action item, so you guys aren't making a decision tonight, but just to kind of put it out there. It is not lost on us that you guys have been inundated with text, emails, phone calls, and in-person conversations regarding the CTAP frequency out of Mountain Home. There are a lot of people that have a lot of experience and education in this area, and they have made their voices heard. Good on them. That is fantastic. I know that there have been some insinuations that failure to decide to go one way or the other is because of somebody's either lack of concern of safety or personal vendetta. And I would just like to say that everybody I've spoken to, everybody on the committee, has nothing but aviation safety first and foremost in their mind. If there is a disagreement on one end, it is because they legitimately think that that is the best way to go. Nobody in this wants to prove a point by having a mid-air collision. Everybody is addressed with safety. The last thing I would like to say is I know that there is a lot of people that have brought the real-world consequences to you about what could happen with a frequency change or without a frequency change. I myself included the NTSB reports to you. I just would like to remind everybody on the council, you are not responsible for a mid-air collision that may happen at the airport or to aircraft having a thing like this. You guys are the decision makers, but the pilots are ultimately responsible for their aircraft and for the decisions that they make as the pilot in command for that aircraft. So, as you're making your decisions, please don't think that there's going to be a mid-air collision out there tomorrow and you guys will be blamed somehow. You guys are not responsible for that. And with that, I will just open up any questions you may have for Martin or myself.
Councilwoman Garvey?
Although I won't be here much longer, I really kind of like to hear a little bit more about the AWOS. Being that FAA would fund 90% of it, and it sounds like I just briefly Googled it because I am not a pilot, nor will I ever be because I can't see, but it just sounds like something that it really won't cost the city a lot of money. And if you can eliminate, even say it's 13%, but if you can eliminate that, and it will add efficiency to our winds, everything else, it seems like a win-win situation overall.
I do know you would not be the only person that would be excited about pursuing that opportunity.
Okay.
There are a lot of people that
I'd love to hear a little bit more about that avenue.
Yeah. There are advantages to having the AWOS system. We have, how many approaches do we have? We have 2 approaches, instrument approaches into Mountain Home, and if they have weather at Mountain Home, they're allowed to descend to a lower decision altitude. And if they gotta get their weather from Mount Home Air Force Base or Boise, they cannot descend as low. So we make those approaches more friendly, more usable in bad weather. So
Yeah,
there's an advantage to having AWAS.
Yeah, I don't know, I don't know if this is, I don't know that this is exactly the answer, but I think even so, even if this isn't even the answer, if there is a funding mechanism that will fund 90% of this and it's overall more safety, and what does it say? It's improved safety, increases operational efficiency, why not?
No, I don't know what the budget is for Mount Home. I can't ask you to spend money you don't have.
We can put it in our CIP for the future. So, the other thing that I kind of just, thank you, AJ, for saying, so that we can sleep at night, that if something happens, because this is not an easy decision, especially because speaking for just myself here, I'm not in the aviation industry. I have no idea. And yes, we have been inundated with emails, but just looking over everything, I mean, the pros definitely outweigh the cons, but I think it's a work in progress, and I appreciate this presentation because it spells it out in a way that, for myself, is easy to understand, so I appreciate it. But I like maybe the AWAS attitude.
Sorry. So Toby, our funding mechanism, right now, it's being utilized for the current projects currently, right?
Yes, sir.
So next year's funding mechanism, so what was it, $35,000? What's the chances of the FAA funding the 90%? Is that like a 2-year, 3-year timeline? We have to get that onto the FAA for the AWAS system?
Yeah, currently we have a FY26 project already programmed.
Okay.
So it would be out at the earliest 27 there.
Okay.
We currently have we actually have the next 6 years spoken for. That doesn't mean they can't be moved. But probably the earliest would be 27. And I did want to caveat something on the funding. The FAA only provides funding for the initial install. So annualized, the city would be on the hook for just under $11,000 a year for 15 years. If you annualize that over 15 years. From a budgeting purpose.
I think $11,000 is a small portion to improve our airport, which we've been working diligently to improve with the land that we've acquisitioned, and so I think that's a small improvement and something to look forward to.
Councilor
Mayor,
Hang on one second, Councilor Brennan.
I'd like to seek clarification on my earlier question with what Toby said is, I asked about this being like, is it new and additional money that the city can receive, or it's a new project that we have to fund within the money we're receiving?
Yes, we would have to replace an existing project on your capital improvement plan with the AWAS.
It's not additional grant money.
So I believe in 27, we're looking at replacing the runway lighting out there that's starting to age. So that would get pushed back in order to insert the AWAS.
Okay. And then sticking to that AWAS conversation, you mentioned the clicking. I don't know much about that. I've heard the 3 clicks being turns on the lights. Is that separating, like the 13% is 7% doing weather station and 6 is doing like clicks to turn on the light?
For what I monitor, there's no way to know.
No way to know that.
But typically, turning on runway lights be a night operation, after sundown. And I know if we have them out there, but this, not much. Most VFR pilots, don't go up and fly around at night.
The analysis did cover 24 hours for each 8 days that we did. Again, they were non-consecutive, so it did include some night operations. I could go back through and look at what specific parts were at night and which ones weren't. I just attributed them all to clicking.
Okay. So if we were to get the new AWAS frequency, will pilots continue to do the 3 clicks on the current,
We would take it over to a different, to the AWAS frequency. The AWAS would have its own separate frequency.
so I might be getting confused. The weather frequency will also control the lights on the,
You can hear the weather and the clicking on 122.8 now.
Now.
I mean, AWAS would have its own dedicated frequency that pilots could go in and they'd take that clicking with them through a different frequency, so you weren't hearing it on the one where airborne operations were being.
just for weather though.
Yes.
And then those who need to turn on the lights will stay on the current frequency.
Yes.
Only weather breaks.
That's what I understand, yes.
That's the way I understand it.
Toby's not back there too, so.
Look at Tom too, Toby and
Yes.
Tom. So hang on, hey, hang on one second. Councilwoman Workla.
Yeah, hi, is there a Mr. Thomas Mahoney with us tonight?
Yes.
With the Idaho Transit Department, okay. Yeah, because we received an email that he was gonna be there tonight. Is he able to, and I'm sorry, I can't place faces with names, so I'm not sure if he spoke or not, but is he able to, give his 2 cents, since we received an email from him stating that he'd be happy to give us some insight?
Absolutely. Come on down. Really quick, hey, 1 second. Just a moment. Any other further questions for Martin or AJ?
Appreciate
Thank you for your time.
Dude, you crushed it. You gave us a lot of information, so, and then, I can't even believe how many hours you probably put into this, but thank you, AJ. All right, Mr. Mahoney's up front and live for you, Councilwoman.
Councilwoman McCullough, thank you very much for the transition. Mayor Sykes, thank you for the introduction. And I just have to applaud those 2 guys, Martin and AJ. They did a super job with that. And I would like to follow up on some of your questions, especially you, Councilman Brennan. So before I do that, though, let me introduce myself. Tom Mahoney. I first bought a house here in 1989. I sold it in 92, moved away for about 10 years with the Air Force, came back to Boise in 2001, and have been flying. Well, let's see, when I showed up here, I was a private pilot, but I did my instrument rating, commercial rating, flight instructor, and instrument flight instructor ratings, all with the Mountain Home Airport. That was all back 89 to 92. Came back in 2001. I've been an instructor in the Ponderosa Aero Club, which is the biggest aero club in the state. I've come down here quite a bit. Been that for about 20-some years. And for the past 2.5 years, I've been the administrator for the Division of Aeronautics, which is part of the Transportation Department. So I'm a state employee responsible for aviation within the state. And so I know a lot about Mountain Home. I'm very happy to be back here. We actually come down here and train. Even our state airplanes come down here at times, just because it's easier than trying to fly up in Boise. Real quickly, I've got a few slides. I'll go through those, and then I'd like to come back to some of the questions and just to clarify some of the answers to those. At least give you my 2 cents on what I think. So the first slide there is kind of ugly, and I'll apologize. I'm not a professional PowerPoint guy, and I can put some stuff together, but the bottom of the slide there, and Councilwoman Workla, I apologize, but what I've got up here is a graph that just basically shows the last 3 years. So in gold there is the ADSB. So what does that mean? That's the GPS trackers that we carry around in airplanes, and they report out your position. It doesn't capture all the airplanes that are in the area, but this is through a web service called FlightAware, which a lot of us use. And the gold one there is from 2 years ago, and it basically shows kind of a level pattern there. The dark blue line shows a slightly higher trend. That would be last year, and then the light blue line is the one on, or light blue on top is this year. You'll see it stops in September, which is when one of my guys pulled the data. But you can see there's definitely a trend going up over time. And so a lot of this discussion on radio frequencies started actually a couple years ago, and you can see what's happened in the past 2 years, which is the amount of traffic is definitely going up. In fact, if you go look at the last week that's shown in this chart, the traffic at Mountain Home is 2.5 times what it was 2 years ago. Next slide, please. Very quickly, this is a slide from the Boise Airport. I gave this to our Aeronautics Advisory Board. We do a quarterly meeting, and gave this last week. And this comes from the Boise Airport Director. And 2020 there on the left is, the COVID year, so that one's a little bit off. But you can see the trend. And on the right in the green block there, it shows an 81% increase over the last 10 years in the number of passengers. And that can relate right back to the number of airplanes that are flying. Next slide. Not only is the traffic at Boise growing, but we have 2 runways up there. In the last last couple years, we have not had 2 runways for about 7 to 8 months out of the year because I've been working on changing the runways and making them safer. And this slide just shows that for the next couple years, in fact, Toby can probably back me up with some of the engineering analysis of this, but there's a lot going on at the Boise Airport. Over the next 2 years, they're working on the north runway. We initially thought it was going to be a pretty easy fix, but they got into doing the research on it, and they figured out that the structure beneath the runway is not as good as it ought to be. So that has turned into a $70 million project that's going to take a couple years. So that's going to go on for a long time. Next slide. And then 2 years further out, 28, 29, they're going to work on the south runway, which is in pretty good shape, but they're going to move it. They call it a realignment, but really they're just sliding it 2,000 feet. They're going to move it 2,000 feet closer, actually closer to Mountain Home, closer to the east, so they can line up those 2 runways. But what does that mean overall? That means for the last 2 years and now for the next 4 years, Boise has 1 runway for the period from about April till right about now. They just opened the second runway last week. I landed on it for the first time in 6 months. What does that mean to Mountain Home? That means that there's no training going on in Boise. Or if there is, it's in the middle of the night, and that's pretty rare. So a lot of the traffic, like the Ponderosa Aero Club, I used to do lots of training in Boise. We no longer do that. We used to go to Napa Caldwell. They're so busy, we typically don't go there anymore. Where do we go? Mountain Home, Gooding, Jerome, might go to Emmett, other places like that. But Mountain Home is becoming increasingly popular with Boise having as many restrictions as it has. Next slide, please. This is kind of an oddball photo here, but this is the Silverhawk Aviation Academy out in Caldwell. And you might say, well, why do I care about Caldwell? Because they're on a different frequency. But about half of that operation is associated with fixed wing. So the helicopters stayed in Caldwell, but the fixed wing went to Ontario, Oregon. In fact, they bought the fixed base operator out there. And so their fixed wing operation is primarily over in Ontario, which is the same frequency as Mountain Home, and it's within line of sight. So maybe not from the ground, but certainly from the air, you can be talking to all the airplanes associated with half of those people. Next slide, and I think this is my last one, and this is the one that basically got me invited to this meeting. In the spring, I drew this up as a flight planning software that many of the pilots will use, and I just drew this up, and it comes back to a comment AJ made about when you do overflights, you can just tune your radio to 1 frequency and just stay on that frequency. And so if you were to stay on Mountain Home's frequency and make that flight right there, on the upper left, that's Ontario and Weiser, and on the bottom right, Gooding and Jerome. But you can do that whole flight and never change your radio. But what does that mean? That also means that you get to listen to all 5 airports when you're in the air. And it is congested. I will talk a couple things. One of the things when we talk about congestion is, let's say, Mayor Sykes, I want to talk to you, and I don't want other people talking, right? It's just going to be you and me talking back and forth, that's fine. But if there's a big conversation going on, not only could our conversation be restricted, but I might get so busy trying to think through all these voices that I don't do something I should do. A friend of mine, about 10 years ago now, the Ponderosa Aero Club, was flying in Caldwell, very busy. This is back when Caldwell and Napa were on the same frequency. So much chatter on the radio. He was trained to be a commercial pilot, and he forgot to put his gear down. And he crashed an airplane because he got so busy with all the radio talk and everything. His mind was just so preoccupied with all that he just forgot a very basic thing in his airplane. So there's multiple effects. Likewise, as an instructor, I would tell you, one of the hardest things to do as an instructor is I want to talk to my student, and I can't because there's radio communication going on. If I could just have a quiet environment, maybe I could talk a little bit more, maybe my student could think a little bit, and get task saturated by listening to all these radios, especially when they're not at the airport that they're at. I just want to summarize a couple things here, and a few key takeaways that I wanted to make. One is basically the population in Idaho has grown, as you well know. There was a pilot shortage that's slowly being resurrected, but there's a lot more pilot training going on now than there used to be. Boise's run one way that I talked about. Bottom line is there's a lot more traffic at Mountain Home over the last couple of years than we've seen. I mean, when I trained back in 89 and 92, there was nobody else. I mean, I never heard anybody from Gooding or Jerome or whatever. It was very quiet, and that's certainly not the case anymore. The FAA recognized this. This problem that we're talking about tonight has happened around the United States, decades before now. It's just now catching up with Idaho. And so what did the FAA do? AJ mentioned the radio frequencies, and to come back to the question about whether we get our own, probably not. the FAA designated, instead of one, they had frequency 122.8. That was the original. And then they came up with two others. Nampa got one, Caldwell got the other one. So they had three for quite a while. And now they've added four more. So there's 7 total frequencies. There's a couple of them that are available that there's no other place close. But we're not probably going to get our own frequency. But the high likelihood is you would rarely hear anybody else. So I think I'm pretty comfortable with whatever we come up with. And by the way, you would work with the FCC, Federal Communication, along with the FAA on that. So what are the pros of doing this switch? First of all, increase in safety. We talked a little bit about AJ. I was glad he brought up the liability. It's funny, when exposure first came up earlier in this meeting, my first thought went to liability. The city of Mountain Home does have a little bit of liability. I mean, there's been plenty of documented talk now about this issue, and if 2 airplanes ran together and a contributing factor was congestion on the radio, you can guarantee that you will be a defendant in a lawsuit. Guaranteed. Not me personally, but the city would certainly. At least I would expect it. Could they win on that? Yeah, I don't know. Probably don't have a real strong argument, but I think there is some exposure there. What are the cons? I really appreciate what AJ and Martin did. They put up 5 pros, 5 cons, but I will tell you the relative weight of those is significantly different. There's a whole lot of benefits to switching the frequencies, and those reasons for not switching are mostly immaterial or really small. So I wouldn't worry too much about those. To come back to a few questions here, just going to read my notes real quick. Overflights, the 122.8, I'm glad there was a question about that, about if you overfly, can you just stay on one frequency? Well, the truth of the matter is, there are some airports on 122.8. There's a lot more on 122.9. So it's actually a mix, and you're actually better off, and the FAA encourages people to not just monitor those frequencies, but to go ahead and talk to Mountain Home Approach, to talk to Salt Lake Center, and do what we call BFR flight following. So you actually get radar flight following, and that's actually a better procedure. So is it easier? Yeah, you could monitor 122.8, but it's really not that big a deal. I really appreciate the NTSB reports that were given, but I think that's a little bit of Wizard of the Oz kind of look at things, because those accidents are they're represented, they happened, but do they really apply? Well, yes. Occasionally, people will forget to change their frequency, but what's not shown in those NTSB reports is the accidents that were prevented by having clear communications. So yes, we can cherry pick a few accidents, but really, if we have our own dedicated frequency, not the congestion, you'll save accidents, and you won't see the report mistakes. So you don't really see the other side of that. It's funny, the Ontario Gooding airport managers, I know Dale Thomas over at Gooding, great guy, he knows what he's talking about, and neither one of those airports have a problem. And you're right, because they're so far apart. One of them is way to the east, one of them is way to the west, and they don't hear each other. But Mountain Home, who's in the middle, does hear them. So Mountain Home has an issue that those 2 airports don't have. So it's an interesting perspective. On the AWAS, I'm glad Toby chimed in a little bit on CIPs. And by the way, my job is the guy who works for me does grants. So that's in my office where we distribute the FAA will provide 9%, but that other 10% gets split usually between the local municipality, the airport sponsor, and then the state. So that all flows through my office, and we work with the FAA to figure out those grants. Toby's right, the next 6 years are basically all planned out. That doesn't mean it doesn't change, and they change all the time. So the next year or 2 are probably fairly fixed. But I would say year 3, 4, 5, something like that, we could look at it. Is it a fixed amount? Yes, but the FAA can also tweak things a little bit, so we can certainly try. One point I want to clarify on that AWAS. What you have today is a very basic weather system that's not certified by the FAA. It's just nice information to have. If you're going to shoot an instrument approach into Mountain Home Municipal, you have to get the Air Force Base's altimeter setting, because that's approved for use by the FAA. If you want to get the $350,000 AWAS, that's a completely different deal. There's a huge advantage to that in that when you shoot those instrument approaches, you can go down to lower weather minimums. And the benefit to Mountain Home is live flight, medical things. If you're doing medical evacuations on a really bad weather day, it's kind of nice for those medevac airplanes to be able to land in lower conditions. So that would be really nice to have. I will say the FAA probably isn't going to be real excited about funding it because I don't think you get enough instrument traffic in here to justify spending that much money. But I don't know. We won't know until we ask the question. So it's worth trying. There are a lot of other cheaper alternatives, by the way, $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 that can do much the same, but they're not FAA certified. And that concludes my remarks, and happy to answer any questions.
Just know that we can count on your funding from your department in 3 years.
Yeah, I wish I could agree with that, Mayor Sykes, but I really can't. But we certainly will try. I've talked to the guy that works for me about this subject, and trying to find money for it. And sometimes the state has extra money, and so we can fund some projects. We're doing, well, it's not approved yet, but we're going to the Transportation Board next month for 3 airports where we'll provide money, sometimes as much as 75% of the cost of the project.
Councilwoman Garvey?
Did I hear you correctly that you don't believe that we would be approved to switch frequencies? Did I hear you correctly when you said that at the beginning?
Councilwoman Garvey, I think that's incorrect. What I meant to say was I think you would be approved.
Oh, okay.
And the frequency, it'll be one of the 7 frequencies.
Okay.
In fact, I know 3 of them there won't be. It won't be 122.8, and it won't be NAMCO or Caldwell's frequency. It'll be something else. I did a rudimentary analysis myself, and I found 2 of them that aren't in use anywhere near here. But someone smarter than me will have to look at that. But I'm 99% sure it would be approved.
Okay. I wasn't sure why you can't. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that kind of scratches my other question. And I wasn't sure. I was like, well, then I guess we'll have to put together a long-term plan. But I don't disagree. So I kind of, well, I said before, the pros outweigh the cons. And I know this is a non-action item today, and I'm not sure where we're looking to go forward. Are we looking just to table this tonight or discuss it later further? But I think the way that we're trying to grow our airport, why not?
I think if we could get,
I'm just looking for some direction. Where is the city hoping to go? Somebody's.
so Toby or Tom, do you want to buy in on this? Is AWAS the best route to go if we get somebody else to pay for it?
He was, we should definitely go for it as fast as we can.
Okay, well so to me, it's 35K, right? I mean, if Mr. Mahoney's gonna fund the 35K, we're all in, so we can do that. But I know we have our CIP that we're gonna have to look at, because I think the lights they're pretty important for the pilots as well. Yeah, 11K every year.
So it's 350,000,
Right.
not 35,000.
Well, no, our 10%.
Okay.
Our 10% of the, so when you're saying that the
Mayor Sykes, we would probably
FAA won't fund the 35, but 350,000 this year?
Oh, they absolutely won't do it this year. They look, I would say, totally know better than me, but they're
Yeah.
probably 3-4 years out. The next year or 2 are pretty well locked in their plan. Toby and I both know the key FAA person. Her name is Jennifer Shilden, who works the state of Idaho. We will work with her to figure this out, but it's probably 3 or 4 years out before we can do this. And if we do the full up AWAS, 350,000, the FAA pays 9%. The state will come in at 5% usually. So that'll come out of my office, so it's even less for you. And I think it makes a lot of sense. I do want to clarify though, the AWAS, as the statistics showed, was only 13% of the problem. So it would be nice to fix that, but the real problem is getting the frequency changed. That's what really needs to happen. The AWAS would be nice. Councilman Brennan, just to follow up on one of your questions, you asked about the 3 clicks, and I forgot to mention this, but, and we brought up the night stuff. So typically if I'm a pilot coming in, I'm gonna, if we had a separate AWAS frequency, it's a different frequency, I'll change to it, I'll listen to the weather, get that weather. Then I'll switch over to the common frequency, which right now is 122.8. And I'll click, and I think in Mountain Home, somebody can correct me, it's probably 5 clicks to turn on the lights, 5 or 7. And usually there's a medium setting, a high setting, whatever. There's a certain number of clicks, and those will turn on the lights. I would suggest that they're 2 separate things. Most of that 13% is probably the day ones where people are trying to check the weather. The night ones are not very many, and we tend to not have much congestion at night. So I don't think we really have to worry about it too much. I would argue most of it's for the day.
For weather.
For weather.
Okay.
Yeah.
Mayor, question?
Yeah, go ahead.
If we were to go the direction of a whole new frequency,
Yeah.
would, would the AWAS then be a priority? If it's a few years out and we could change the frequency relatively quickly, can we keep all of that on the same new frequency and be fine, since there's no competition with another airport than here?
Councilman Brandon, I would probably prefer to Toby or even Tom to know how their system is set up. And I think I would have changed the frequency yesterday. I mean, just do it and switch both of them over. Or, Mr. Thompson suggested just shutting it off. You could certainly do that. I don't, frankly, find a whole lot of value to it, but a lot of HUDs now have a lot of that information provided to them electronically. And so their iPads that they're flying with have a lot of information already. But to answer your question, yes, I think you can drag both of those onto the new frequency, and I see no reason not to do it sooner rather than later. And it's a pretty straightforward process. It'd probably take 60 days, 90 days, something like that to work through it. But it doesn't cost hardly anything. It's pretty easy to do. We just did it at Caldwell, 4 years ago.
So, Thomas, sorry, go ahead.
Tom, would you jump in and help me with that question?
Which one?
If we get a whole new frequency,
Right.
do we need to separate
The
AWAS?
AWAS frequency would be different. The FAA certified AWAS would have its own frequency. So
Okay.
currently, as a pilot, when you're flying along, we would look at our sectional or our flight, and it gives us at that airport, U-76 or a different airport, it would give you the Unicom frequency and it would give you the AWAS frequency. And you would tune that up, listen to it, get the weather information, and then go back to the other frequency.
Right, but to answer your question, Councilman Brennan, yes, I think we would drag both in the near term. Like if we were to switch the radios tomorrow, you could switch that weather system, which is not a full of AWAS, you can switch that over to the
So-
current frequency, right?
Can I ask you a question, sir?
Yeah.
What data have you populated on people wanting to switch the frequency? Because I've asked the general public and different various agencies that operate out of here, and overall, I see people that do not want, I have letters from them stating that they don't want the frequency because changed due to when they're flying along, they want to be able to listen to other airports. The other thing is what people aren't stating is when you talk on the radio, you state what airport you're from. So if you're Ontario, it would be Ontario traffic. If it's Mountain Home, it's Mountain Home traffic. So the person on the radio understands what area that communication is coming from. All I'm saying is, I did the research. You, ladies and gentlemen, have the information. I don't want to turn this into a political insight because that's the way it seems like, Tom. It's very upsetting for me to understand that you're here. You didn't send a letter officially, right, about a safety concern issue. I've never received an issue from the FAA stating there's a safety issue. And then we're here on a situation like this because of a friendship that you have with somebody. Is that why we're here today having this discussion?
Can I jump in? I don't think this
Hang
is...
on one second. Let's just table the rest of this. We'll have we'll have another discussion, more discussion. Nothing's happening tonight, so no, we're not changing the frequency tonight. Nothing's going to happen tonight. We'll have a discussion, and maybe we can all get together, have a meeting, and get the data. Because go ahead, Councilman Hartry.
I had a series of questions that have come. We need to get through some of the testimony and stuff tonight.
Go ahead.
If I can ask those before we get to a point of table. Mr. Mahoney, thanks for coming, obviously. In the process of listening to the Airport Advisory Committee, looking through all the data that's been provided to us, including all the links to other documentation regarding the FAA, I have a series of questions that I was hoping you might be able to help out with. So the Division of Aeronautics, are you guys charged with the task of all aeronautic safety, including radio traffic?
It doesn't specify in the statute. It just talks about the safety and execution effectiveness of the aviation system in the state of Idaho. The word frequency or radio is technology. It's not mentioned.
But under the umbrella?
It is under the umbrella.
Aeronautics.
Yes, sir.
One of the big questions that I have is a lot of the data that we've received reflects perspective and touches on key data from different data points, but there hasn't been a cohesive report that would indicate, define, or refute the fact that we must change, that we're at a point that Mountain Home U76 is at this threshold, we're approaching this threshold of growth in daily or annual operations that hits this data point that goes, okay, everybody's starting to recognize that this is problematic. We have reports from the FAA, we have inspections from the FAA, the FCC, NTSB, TSA. In all of those reports, or all those like site visits and all those things, like I can't find any specific data from a 3-letter agency, including ITD, that says, hey, you have a problem and this needs to be defined. Is there anything of that nature that we can refer to? And I ask that for a very specific reason, because I know from myself, I'm not a pilot. I've never been certified to be a pilot. I don't pretend to know what the rest of this council has in their experience in that realm. We rely on the feedback of our airport advisory committee quite a bit. They're the professionals in the realm. We rely on people like yourself. So this is where I ask, is there any quantifiable data that somebody could come put a report in front of us that says, hey, you're reaching this threshold?
Councilman Harjo, I wish I could provide that. AJ touched on it when he made his comparison about Nampa and Caldwell and said, there was no set threshold. There isn't going to be anybody who comes out and says, at this threshold you should change radio frequencies. To Tom's point, some people just say, hey, I don't want to change because I don't want to have to change frequencies, or I just want to fly along and listen to 122.8. Others look at it, and the analysis I tried to give is just big picture. Just traffic volumes have come up. Mountain Home's in the middle. There are frequencies available. The FAA has provided these frequencies, and the process to change is really easy. I don't see hardly any downside other than maybe a couple $100 to buy signs. Other than that, there's really no downside to doing this. On the upside, you get a much clearer radio frequency to talk on. How did I become aware of this? I must tell you, I have an acquaintance who brought this to my attention a couple of years ago. I don't really have any preference one way or the other down here. I'm just looking at the safety of the situation. And unfortunately, I can't give you any 3-letter state or federal agency that's going to come in and say, you need to do this now. It just doesn't exist. Every situation's a little different. And it's really up, I think, probably to the airport manager, the airport commission, perhaps, with your leadership about what to do. But I don't know, I think we're making a mountain out of a molehill, to be quite honest.
Understood. Again, in all of the mountain of information that's been presented to us, there were several links to FAA documentation. One of those, just a brief second, I'm trying to find the link that I had for that. It was an an FAA document that AC 90-66C that talks about from the U.S. Department of Transportation, Federal Aviation Administration, subject being non-towered airport flight operations. This document was referenced in a significant number of technical references. A lot of what I deduced from the 4 instances of the NTSB reports that were sent to us, several of those mention this document. And there are several references in here that, for me, beg the question, is the perception of radio congestion more perception-based than data-based? And does that factor trump what this document is defining prior to takeoff, traffic verification, communications? There's one really specific instance in here. I'm trying to scroll down to to. No radio aircraft. We don't have a requirement at 76 to even have a transmission or receiver radio to fly into this airport. So that kind of leads me to a number of questions, right? Like this statement in this document from the FAA says pilots should be aware of the procedures at airports without operating control towers generally do not require the use of two-way radios. Therefore, pilots should be especially vigilant for other aircraft while operating the traffic pattern. Pilots of inbound aircraft are not capable of radio communications and should determine the runway in use prior to entering the traffic pattern by observing the landing direction indicator with an indicator, landing, departing traffic, and previously referring to relevant airport publications and by other means. So we do have plenty of scenarios here. We're fortunately situated near a lot of backcountry. 122.9 is the holding comp in that realm. Again, my question is, are we looking at perspectives without data that drives the decision? Because data that drives the decision is what a person like me sitting up here who has no aeronautic background but knows how to read technical literature, I start to question where the fault lies in these accidents. And this document in and of itself frequently references that it's the pilot's determination of safety and entering the traffic pattern. It's the pilot's obligation to have line of sight, to abort the traffic pattern if there's an unsafe scenario. And it sounds like in these NTSB reports that there's not really that decision being made by those pilots in those instances. So again, you know, I'm definitely on the page, I think, with the rest of the council. I won't speak for them, but AWAS seems a very logical next step. Changing the frequency in addition to or separate from that or as a standalone answer, again, like as the layman who has to interpret these things and make a decision, it's very difficult to find confirmation in a report that says, not home, U-76, you have a problem. Is there anything that I can reference?
There's nothing to reference in terms of a hard data point. I might suggest that we flip the script a little bit and make the arguments, why should it stay the same? And I think you'd find very little evidence, very little support to leave the frequency on 122.8 when you have so many benefits of switching the frequency. I think if you're looking for data, the one data that is available is that the traffic counts have gone up. We know the traffic is significantly increased. We know traffic out of Boise, Caldwell, Nampa is coming here to train. So we're definitely going to see more congestion. And then it's somewhat anecdotal in that how many times do I want to talk on the radio and I can't because someone else is transmitting? And do we have counts of that? No, but I guarantee you that's happening a lot more than it used to. So in my mind, there's very little downside to switching the frequency and a whole lot of benefit. So that's the way I look at it.
So, go ahead.
Sorry, I'll make this one short. So in the operation data that you show from 23, 24, 25, and then the 25 data today, one of the documents that we were presented with did a look back that was a little farther, going back into the early 2000s. If I remember correctly, because I'm trying to click through here and figure out which one it was, because I closed it by accident. One of the documents provided by the Airport Advisory Committee showed that there was actually a significantly higher rate of airport traffic here in the mid to late early 2000s, averaging near the 20,000 annual operations versus our current 17,800 change or whatever that was. Again, I'm trying to reference off memory here. At that several thousand more operations annually, and this predates the majority of us us in this room, unfortunately. My question is, if there was that much operational traffic then, and those issues existed then, what would the situation be if we were at that point today? If we were at 20,000, and why wasn't it a consideration back then with a significantly higher operation rate than we are today with a lower operation rate comparatively?
Yeah, I'd be really curious because I haven't seen those data to understand where they came from. I would argue that operations at Jerome, Gooding, Ontario have definitely grown in that time. There are flight schools, like you want to Caldwell, and then certainly out there in Ontario. I am not as familiar with Jerome and Gooding, but the other airports that are on the same frequency, they've definitely gone up. I would argue, when I was here 89 to 92, we had a lot of airplanes, a lot of little airplanes at Mountain Home associated with the base. There was just the character of what was out on the base. We had a lot of people who owned airplanes and were flying them. So that's different. So I don't know, perhaps those numbers are swayed a little bit. Like at our Aero Club, we had a number of people from Singapore that would come up and train in Boise. And so I don't know if that's changed. I really can't account for the differences. But my guess is that it was probably an issue then as well. But I don't know. I'm just not familiar with that data.
I'll pause for the question. The insight that you bring, thank you, I appreciate it. You've been the first official in this realm outside of our locals and our engineer partners that have come to speak on any of this matter, and I do think it's a critical topic, obviously, so I appreciate you coming down.
I appreciate the council's interest in this, and I must say, I haven't written a letter or anything. The state tends to not have a heavy hand on municipalities. That's the direction of my bosses, and so, if I need to write a recommendation letter, I'll certainly do it. Typically, we don't. This is a city decision about an airport decision about what to do. I just recommend it, from the expertise of our office in aviation safety, to talk about things we did, things we should consider. But the state has no authority to come in and say, you must do this. No, we can just talk about it and recommend it.
Are there any federal agencies, FAA or otherwise, that we could lean on for that data that may be gathering reports?
There's what's called the Flight Standards District Office in Boise, so the FISDO, FAA. It's the branch of FAA that deals with the operations, and perhaps they would have something. My guess is not. The FCC probably wouldn't be too interested in this, but certainly the FAA might.
Councilman Brennan?
Sorry, I don't want to rush through this. I'm going to get a couple questions answered. I've asked two. I'm going to ask another one because I don't feel like I've gotten an answer. So, Toby, you're on the hot spot now.
Yes, sir.
Your turn. If we get a new frequency, is there any need to move forward with the money for the AWAS system? Like, I'm confused on that. I feel like if the direction of the city were to be whole new frequency, I don't feel like we need to invest in the other AWAS. But am I totally off track?
I think you're right in the aspect that it's two separate issues. If you were to change frequency, that would, I guess, address the issue that's been brought up. And then the question is, do you want to use AWAS that's certified by the FAA? And that goes down another path, and that's really for flight procedures, instrument flights, possibly lower minimums, but not likely. So there's other reasons to get an AWAS if you've already changed the frequency.
The certified AWAS, does it have to stay on the 122.8?
A certified AWAS would go on its own separate frequency.
Separate, not even our new traffic pattern. Okay.
But if, say, you switch frequencies and you wanted to keep your existing non-certified AWAS, it would move over to your new frequency.
Okay. So we've been operating on a non-certified for a long time. No reason to
That
probably.
That thing has been decertified since 2012. The FAA does not recognize the data.
So, sorry. Does it meet the needs, the mission of what it's there for? Or no?
Probably as much as your phone does, but I'm not a pilot. But there's no, from the FAA standpoint, there's no, they put no value in it.
Okay. For the individual pilot, do they put weight in it?
Councilman, I would say there is value. If I'm flying in from Boise or Twin Falls or something, and I'm coming to Mountain Home, and I can check in 15 miles before I get here and find out what the wind is, that's kind of nice. So I kind of plan what runway I'm going to be on, or check my altimeter setting and make sure that's right. But I can't use it for an instrument flying. It's just visual flying. And if I don't have that ability, well, what you do is, as was mentioned earlier, you just fly over the airport, you look down at the windsock or whatever wind indicator you have, and then you set yourself up to land on the airport. So it is useful, but it's not terribly useful. It's not very
Okay, really quick, so our chairman said that since that is outdated, that would take all the clicks out, right? If we got rid of it, it'd take 13% of the clicks out of the clicking, right? So our chairman said that we all have the iPads, the cell phones, we can all check the weather, we can all check all that. So isn't that what everybody's doing today anyways, is the new technology, the GPS, the iPads, so we should take it out, get rid of the 13% clicks, and that solves 13% of the issue right now. Boom. Right? Hang on a second. Right? Toby, Chairman, Tom?
Yes, sir. Mayor Sykes, it would take 13% out. It's a small step.
Okay. Okay, go ahead.
And I just want to provide an example of, I guess, my life. And it is not aeronautic based, but it's working on a radio every day on the highway. Okay, so where I work is I have the choice to use a channel that we would call Patrol 2, right? And that is everybody in the Treasure Valley for our agency, including state fish and game and probation and parole officers that are out there. They're all on that frequency. And here at Mountain Home, I can be on that frequency too. I can choose to be on that frequency. But lucky for me, I can choose to be on Bennett Mountain, which is a frequency of my own. Can you guess which one I'm going to choose? I'm going to choose Bennett Mountain and be all by myself on the radio for the reasons that are being discussed here. So it's not air traffic, right? Because I have a dispatcher who can tell me if there's an emergency on the other channel, and I don't think you guys do. So there are differences, and I recognize that. But I also see the value of being a field training officer who gets to have a clear level head to teach somebody else in the car and tell them to turn off all the other radio traffic in Boise, because it doesn't matter now. So I guess that's the example I'd like to provide. That's all.
Mayor,
Okay, hang on one second. Councilwoman Garvey. And then Councilwoman.
I lost my.
Okay. Councilman Harjo.
One thing I touched on that I forgot to circle back to. Martin mentioned chatter due to training on 122 range that is experienced at Mountain Home. And on that FAA.AC 90-66C, the recommended communication practices subsection 4 reads, pilots should limit communication on CTAPs to safety essential information regarding arrivals, departures, traffic flow, takeoffs, and landings. CTAPs should not be used for personal conversation. Now, understanding like training of young pilots or novice pilots, you have to have the situational awareness and you should be following certain procedures, but it, again, my question keeps boiling back to, is the perception of communication congestion on 122A boiling back down to poor practice by pilots? Like that seems to be a significant factor, not just here, but in the NTSB reports. And in every instance that I can find of air traffic issues related to congestion, that it comes back to human error oftentimes. And the citation of chatter due to training, this statement in that FAA report kind of leads me to believe that human choice is a primary factor.
Yeah, Councilman Harjo, I would push back on that. The vast majority of pilots do it right. There might be a very small percentage of people who don't have good radio discipline, and we hear about those cases, but the vast majority of people are doing it correct. And even if you took out those bad actors, it's not going to change the situation here hardly at all. The situation here is just the fact that you're listening to whatever training is going on here and in Ontario and Weiser and Jerome and Gooding. And I wouldn't think that the bad actors have much of an influence. There's actually a little bit more of it on 122.9 in the backcountry where people chat just a little bit, but they'll get scolded if they talk too much. Somebody will get right. In fact, I'm usually the one who does that. I will get on it and say, you guys talk too much, or take it to a different frequency, kind of thing, and scold people.
Councilman Workla.
Yeah, Mayor, I want to say thank you for bringing up the GPS and the iPads. It refreshed my memory that I was talking to my former commander about this just because he's blown everything you can name the man. And he said, so as a proponent of safety and not waiting for an accident before you change something, and if the data you provided is 100% accurate, I would vote to change the frequency. As do many pilots use iPads in for flights and navigation, that the electric version would more than likely be as soon as it was approved to change. The old school paper chart guys will just have to ensure they're keeping updated charts in their aircraft and not relying on memory. The charts are new and issued every 56 days, so it doesn't take that long to update. So I worked 9 years at Western Air Defense Sector, and I said, hey, what if, the guys don't read the daily NODA? Because, if we had POTUS in a certain area and there's restricted airspace, if someone didn't read the daily NODAMs and they're breaking the restricted airspace, we would scramble our jets on them. And I said, what about the guys aren't, doing their, their due diligence of reading the daily NODAMs? And he says, those type of comments come from immature and inexperienced pilots. But the pilot checking NODAMs is supposed to be part of your pre-flight planning. With flight, it's right in front of you, so there's no excuse not to check them. So I just want to point that out because I needed to reach out at this local community to just see other perceptions and opinions on the topic. And the other thing I want to point out as well, I think it would be irresponsible of us not to, or if we heard tonight from the Administrator of Idaho Division Aeronautics, who was part of the Idaho Transportation Department, who right here, he said in his email to you, Mayor, he says, our mission is to provide a transportation system that is safe, keeps people and goods moving efficiently, and supports the state's economy. I think if we hear his professional opinion tonight on we need as a city, as an airport, we need to change this, not maybe not, but we should be changing this, and we ignore this, and tomorrow there's an accident because we didn't change it. Talk about a lawsuit, right? So, right now, for me, Mr. Mahoney, I've never met you before, never spoke to me before. This is the first time I ever heard from you this tonight. Hearing from a professional, to me, this tells me that we can't expect. So, and my request is can we table this and make it an action item at our next meeting to be voted on?
Councilwoman, hang on 1 second. Councilwoman Workla, let me, Councilwoman Garvey.
Sorry, I support that. That's why I was just trying to figure out where we're going with this tonight. We're having this in-depth conversation, and this is a non-action item. It just is meaningless to have this conversation if we're not going to solve the problem. And so I support Councilwoman's Workla's request. We're not solving anything by leaving this as a non-action item. So I would like to see it come back. To become an action item, to make a decision on this topic. And I echo what she just said. I mean, we are not the experts here, and it's not for us to, for us to deliberate and discuss, but we don't know. And, and this isn't really anything that has to do with what you said tonight, other than, we, or so I believe, been led to believe that we're trying to expand our airport, and it's really exciting for me. Being on council, one thing we did do is that we were able to secure another 200 acres of land, and that's huge. So we can expand our airport, and it's no strings attached. We have nothing around us. And so we have this fantastic opportunity to actually expand our airport, with Caldwell being the only relief airport closest to us. And Mountain Home really, as far as economic development, that's such a prime opportunity. We have the rail right there. So I'm thinking, I'm like, why wouldn't we go ahead and just do this? Get this one little thing knock it out of the way. It's so easy. It just, to me, is like, why are we even talking about this? Let's get it done. And if it will help, let's move on with it. So I support Councilwoman Borgo's request to move it to next meeting. Hopefully everybody's got their questions answered by then.
Councilman Brennan? Okay.
Next meeting.
Mr. Mahoney, thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you for the reports, AJ, and
Yeah, thank you guys.
I don't think Martin left. Oh, there he is. But here, move forward. Let's get down to action item, new business, number 3, deliberation of decision, planning and zoning commission recommendation, findings of facts for the request preliminary plat of Albatross Greens with conditions. Council, what do you want to do? Councilman Brennan.
I'm going to come forward for just a sec.
Hey, come on down.
Good evening, Mayor and Council, staff, citizens.
I'd like to just jump right in and if I could ask you to help me understand, and pardon me, I'm just going to kind of combine the conversation with the preliminary plat and the PUD as far as the requested variances that they've sought. I don't know if I was reading it right, but I saw a request for a 0-foot side setback. Is that the nature of the townhouse? If you could just give me what you got on that.
Yeah, Mayor, Councilman Brennan, yes, that's exactly right. This is a townhouse development, so the 0 setback is for those townhouses.
Okay. And so, how many attached individual residences would be on one structure?
I believe they have those set up in banks of 5.
Okay. And does 5 change the nature in which we do EDUs? We had, it's been a long time ago. We changed something to like 4 and less, and then 5 and more, didn't we? Do you remember?
It will not affect these. These will each individually be a single-family dwelling unit, and they will be charged as a single unit.
Individually metered.
Yes.
Okay, so five residences under one structure, but each one of those will sit on its very own property line or lot.
Councilman, that is correct.
And so the 0 setback is because they share a wall, literally.
Correct.
Okay. What other variances have they requested?
They are seeking a reduction in the minimum lot size.
To 2340?
Correct.
From 5,000?
Correct. There will be some of those lots that will be at 5,300 square feet. And those are generally going to be the parcels on the end.
With structures on them, or like park?
With structures.
Okay. Councilman Harder, would you be able to pull up a satellite view of the property?
Brenda, can you remind me some cross streets?
Yeah, East State North, across from the West, of course.
Alright, which of those dirt pieces are we talking about? Now where his mouse is at. This one right here. Down in that, in the back, or, well, is that house gonna get demolished, or is it staying?
Councilman Brennan, yes, that's correct. They'll demolish the house.
They will, okay. So that full rectangle there, what we're talking, even though this is a, is the rest of that the floodway that you're talking about? Okay, the bottom. That's why I'm seeing it in such weird shape. Okay. And were there any other variances other than the lot size?
What they listed in, yes, so front and rear setbacks or variances.
I didn't see the required versus the request.
Sure, if you, Councilman Brennan, if you look at the Albatross Greens Planned Unit Development Agreement, under the bulk and coverage standards, which would be note 9, they write out the minimum lot size, minimum street frontages, front yard setbacks, side yard setbacks, side interior yard setbacks, and rear yard setbacks, what they exist in that zone, and then their proposed request.
Gotcha, thank you.
So what's the likelihood of this actually going through? Because we get a lot of people that come in and do all these plattings, and then you don't see them, and then they don't do something at a certain time, and they got to be gone for a year. What's the likelihood of this actually coming to fruition? You want to speak on? You guys are. This is
Very high, very high. Mayor Sykes, they have a complete team here with them tonight, so I think they're very serious. They've also gone through an H&H study, which monetarily is costly. And so they do have, they are serious about it. But I will let the applicant speak for themselves.
We've been working with the staff for quite a while there, to put together the right project. So we're very committed to it. And if you have your timelines in your code, we'll comply with it.
okay. Council, what do you want to do? Councilman Brennan?
So I'll make a motion to approve the Planning and Zoning Commission's recommendation finding of facts for the requested preliminary plat of the trust greens with conditions.
Second. It's been motioned and seconded. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call for the question. Councilwoman Workla?
Aye.
Councilman Harjo? Aye. Councilman Brennan?
Aye.
Councilwoman Garvey?
Aye.
Run down to action item number 4, deliberation decision on Planning and Zoning Commission recommendation findings of facts to rezone to C3 PUD entitled Albatross Greens with conditions. Councilman Brennan?
One question. Does staff have any other recommendations or requests for this before?
For the PD, what was mentioned in the beginning, but was not present at the time of application, was they were considering a gated community. That is not listed on any of the documentations that was at the planning and zoning hearing. But I don't believe that if that is a route they chose to go, it would be a material change. Listening to council, that would be a material change. So they would have to come back to amend the PUD if that's what they want.
Is there any dedications of parks or anything like this? Public?
Councilman
space?
Brennan, this will all be private. It will be maintained by an HOA.
So you and I had a conversation earlier today that some things didn't get to you before they were final. Is there anything on here that you're 100% okay with?
Mayor, I have looked over the code. I've looked over the applications. Of course, staff has looked over the departments, water, sewer, streets, and we all have confirmed that it meets the requirements, and that they're asked for reductions to vary from the code.
You're okay with it?
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Mayor,
Councilman Brennan?
and the fire department has signed off on it?
That's correct. Within the findings of fact, you'll see that they have required a no parking along the roadways. And then I believe there's also a fire hydrant requirement within the boundaries of the subdivision.
So So the no parking will be enforced solely by the HOA, not by the city law enforcement, right?
I believe the fire marshal required that those be painted red.
Okay. Mayor,
Councilman Brennan?
I'm gonna identify an issue here, and the police chief's sitting right here. I'm gonna talk about this because it sounds like it's applicable, but Paul has helped me understand that we don't have a city ordinance for red zone parking in the city. So there's no prohibition against it in the city, and we can't enforce that upon private property. And that is a goal of mine in the next 2 months, to write an ordinance that says red zone is designated as a no parking on public property. You said not on, I can't do that on private, right?
More complicated than that, but generally I'd say that yes, but private roads open to the public, it could be a requirement or a condition of approval in any subdivision application that though it might be a private road, that will be maintained by the HOA, et cetera, et cetera. I mean, there's still going to be a DUI on that road, there still could be. And so I'm actually writing an ordinance for the city of Eagle right now that's addressing that very topic of private roads that nonetheless are open to the public, and how that the nuances with some statutes actually require it to be a public street versus other ones that are open to the public, but could be private, like Walmart or something.
Okay.
So you can handle that contractually, or you can handle that via an ordinance.
Okay. I'm good with the fire department's request for the red painted curves, and we'll attack that separately.
Okay. Council, what do you want to do?
Mayor, I just have a quick question.
You bet.
I'm probably, Chris, I'm probably reading this. Help me out. East Forest North and East North South is nearing capacity. Which trunk line is that?
It's
So I'm looking at,
it's the trunk line that runs, sorry, Mayor. It's the trunk line that runs down 8th and then crosses
down
over.
like heading towards like
Yeah.
East Elementary.
So East Elementary,
So
the
okay.
dance studio,
Okay,
it's
yeah.
in that area there. But when we had Air Base Road, or not Air Base Road, American Legion tour ago,
Base Road?
no, American, sorry. We actually put a line, an increased size line under that road so that we could connect to it. We hit capacity. So we've already pre-planned for it, it's there.
Okay,
We just need to connect to it when we
Okay,
get that
so
point.
this won't
won't
have
push
any-
us there.
okay.
If we go to what was the project across from the
Golf course.
Gulfview project? If we go to
Yes.
Gulfview, that will push it. This isn't a big enough project to impact it.
Okay, all right. So, but we didn't, okay, all right. Okay.
Councilman Brennan?
To follow up on that, golf view's already been approved,
Right.
so
That's where I'm going with that.
But it's had no.
What's that?
It's had no movement.
have they surpassed their time for the application period?
Councilman Brennan. With the PUD, I don't believe there's a time limit restriction within a PUD in and of itself. But the code does allow for the council to review it at a later date if it does not begin development. I don't think it specifies the time frame of when we review it, but I think it was approved in 2021. So it's been out there a while.
So I guess a legal issue, if a development that we've already approved will cause problems on your words or Keller's words for that line, and a secondary development, application-wise, timeframe is coming in. How does that work, legal?
For what?
That's where I was going with that
Yeah.
question. That's where I was going.
So we've already approved a much larger development that Keller and Mr. Curtis say will have could
For sewer?
take us above capacity for that line.
Yeah, this is a sticky issue to be sure, but the way I view that as far as obtaining building permits, et cetera, is first in time. When you run out, it's not a matter of a vested right versus, I mean, the fact is, it's just pure, at that level, it's pure capacity, and then public health and safety type issues. So that issue is thorny, and that might have to get ferreted out in the courts someday, but there either is or there isn't capacity, that's that. And then you would, I mean, it would be the upon the developer to try to demonstrate that the city over approved without capacity, et cetera, et cetera. It's thorny, but at the end of the day, you either have capacity or you do not.
So just to follow up on that, so what I'm hearing, Paul, what I'm hearing you say is that it's first and right. Okay, so obviously they were first, they've not done anything, so now we're bringing it back, we are approving another subdivision currently, and if they come, they build, and then the other subdivision decides it materializes, at that point we could say our wastewater does not have the current EDUs, does not have capacity, so you must either do X or Y or Z. We have that availability at that time to do, well,
It's the line.
not me.
That's the line.
It's the line, but it is speaking of EDUs, so
Right.
that's why I'm saying that. It's wastewater EDUs is what it's talking about.
Mayor.
Easy.
So, and I think this is gonna jump in where you're at. So, when I started in this position a couple of years ago, one of the things that Council Brennan had us do was we threw in to all the findings of fact based on availability at time of building permit. I think this is exactly applicable to that. So even
Exactly
if
why we write that.
Doesn't it specify
Exactly.
water though and not wastewater?
it doesn't. The capacity. Well, you have to read it. So now I don't want to misspeak. But my understanding is that when we put that in there, it specifically applies to availability of city services at the time of building permit. City services.
Yeah. That makes it very easy for me later. But even in its absence, it's a public health and safety type issue.
Right.
However, going to your question is, I do not believe you're at that position at the time to require an exaction. You cannot do that. But the developer then is in a bit of a pickle because they can't develop. And so it does bring the parties back to the table, so to speak. But no, you can't compel an exaction after final plat, et cetera, et
At
cetera.
that point to either, hey, help us out, or either way, the city of Mount Home's gonna have to fix that line,
Yeah.
period, if that development materializes.
And all these lots and et cetera, this is now their city residents at this point. I mean, the lots and the preliminary plat. It's a citywide problem at that point about providing sewer service.
Okay, hang on one second, everyone, hang on a second. I'm gonna let Councilwoman, go ahead. Councilwoman Workla.
Yeah, thank you, Paula and Chris. So underneath the decision recommendation from P&Z, number 7, it says all development regarding this application will be subject to the city of Mount Home's ability to provide municipal water and wastewater services.
That's what I was.
So, I guess this all comes back full circle, right? Will be subject, right? Application will be subject to if we can provide it. So, again, like if they come as to get that building permit and we don't have the EDUs available, then they could just, they couldn't move forward, correct? But we could approve this today, if they don't get to that point, to get the building permit, then they could die right there, right?
So the question is it's not the EDUs, it's the sewer line capacity. Who will upgrade that when that time happens? Would that be on the golf course commons?
So that falls on to the developer.
Correct.
The development has to pay for their development.
Okay.
So we're requiring that right now of a couple other developments, and
Right.
unfortunately installed a couple of them. But again, our city code says the developer is required to pay those fees because it's for their development.
Perfect. Okay, Councilman Archer.
Gee, sorry. Is the same true if there's geographical separation between the problem point in the infrastructure and the on-the-ground growth that's platted? If we know that there's an issue that's not contiguous with the development itself, say if the congestion that we know in the infrastructure exists 2 blocks down the street.
So this is a couple of blocks down there.
Right, so I'm trying to clarify.
Yeah,
Geographical separation, and that still maintains true.
and we're requiring, I won't say the developer, we're requiring another large developer in Mount Home to do a project on West Fifth that is quite geographically separated from their project for this very same issue, capacity and the line.
Which would entitle them to a latecomer type scenario, if they have to extend farther than what is their proportionate share of it, for the development that occurs in between it that benefits from it.
Okay, council, what do you want to do? Councilman Brennan?
Make a motion to approve planning and zoning submission recommendation finding of facts to rezone C3 PUD, which Ross Green Food Conditions.
Been motion and seconded. Any further discussion?
Better hurry.
Hearing none.
Christmas thinking.
Hearing none, I'll call Councilwoman Garvey.
Aye.
Councilman Harjo. Aye. Councilman Brennan.
Aye.
Councilman Workla.
Aye.
Final comments. Council, what do you got?
Mayor?
Councilman Brennan.
I'd like to request consent from the council to have an action item on the next agenda, which would be the new ordinance for the red painted curb, no parking within the city.
I'm good with that.
Thank you.
All right, go ahead, Councilman Harjo.
Real quick reminder, a lot of the community is affected by the government shutdown right now, including our folks out at the Air Force Base. The city and the Idaho Food Bank have another food distribution coming up this Thursday, 12:30 to 2 or 2:30. I think it's 2:30. At Optimus Park this Thursday. That's free and available to all.
T, you had something?
Councilman Brennan, are you gonna draft it? Do you have a draft?
I don't yet, but I'll take the work on and I'll get it to you just as soon as I can.
Okay.
My work with Paul on that.
Yes.
All I got, council, is, man, Parks and Rec, city staff hit it out of the park for Spooktacular. I think this is probably the largest Spooktacular we've ever had. It was amazing, and to all the city staff and to everybody, and I know Councilman Harjo was that, but like anybody that had any hand in it, you guys crushed it. It was phenomenal, and the kids just kept coming. It was, for 2 hours, it was steady. Well, by 5:30, we're thinking, no, this is gonna be lame this year, but 6 o'clock hit and it was packed, so kudos to everybody. So, Councilman.
I warned Chris I was going to ask him some questions here at the very end. We almost got by without it, but I haven't pre-asked the questions, so I apologize for the...
Put me on the spot.
Yeah, I do. But, so, as far as our Railroad Park project that I talked about the agenda the first meeting of November, can you help the council understand the role of the city staff, public works, the laborers, how much involvement they will be with kind of the unknown amount of like the 60 lines on the contract as far as what we will produce, and tie in like if they weren't doing this railroad park work, what would they be doing in man hours and the justification that we can handle it without being overstaffed, I guess.
So, I can't give you a quantifiable, obviously you understand that. I'm gonna tell you it's gonna be a lot like what we did with the swimming pool, with the street department. So, the swimming pool, when we did that, we still maintained the rest of the city. When we had emergencies, we pulled them from that. I can't give you an exact, this is what won't be occurring, because I don't know that. So, if we have a water main break, which we had a water main break on Saturday, I can't predict that. I can't give you that. But I can tell you that the city services are the #1 priority of all the public works departments. So if we're out there doing, and I will say what we're going to be doing is we're going to be installing sewer lines, main sewer lines. We're not going to do the intimate plumbing because we're not certified to do that. But we're going to install a new sewer line. We're going to install a new water line out there. We're going to do a lot of the prep work for the parking lots. We're going to do a lot of the prep work, and help me Tiffany on this because I'm not going to be able to remember everything on the spot, but prep work for the ponds, for the water, stormwater. We're going to do all that kind of stuff. If the city service comes along that it's a priority, we will obviously shift and take care of the city services as a priority.
Sure.
Again, like I said, when we were looking at the swimming pool project, we pulled 2 to 3 guys from the street department for those projects, and we still accomplished everything. Because I will tell you, you have public works city staff, they're all rock stars. They're going to make everything work.
but I can't give you a quantifiable how much time it's gonna take, and I can't really tell you what it's gonna pull away from. I can tell you right now, the guys are gearing up for snow removal stuff. We were hoping October we would be able to dig into this because we knew we wouldn't have snow. My guys are gonna be pulled away. We're predicting a wet winter. They're gonna be pulled away to do snow removal. That would be the priority. I don't know if that's helping you.
How many snow plows do we have?
So right now we have the two big ones on the dump trucks in the process, thanks to your approval, of getting another one. And they have two small pickup mounted ones with sanders attached to them.
Okay, so two like on a dump truck?
Yeah, dump
Two
truck
on a
mounted.
pickup, and another one on the way.
Yeah.
How much qualified staff do we have to?
Every one of our street department guys is qualified to run them.
Okay,
And then our CDL operators in the water and the wastewater department as well are.
okay.
So
Do you know about how many personnel that is?
10.
Okay. So running full-time snow plows, there's manpower to do pothole patching at the exact same time?
Well, we're gonna do a lot of pothole patching when there's snow on the ground.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Sorry, I'm not trying to be funny, but if there's
Just
snow.
the full job of like street department, guaranteed is gonna come first.
Absolutely.
And so what if GUHO comes to us, if GUHO gets the job, and says, this is a priority, we're at a dead stop, you know, and we're not moving forward until you get over here and do this.
The direction I've been given, city services are number one. That is our priority. That's the direction I've been given.
We pulled them off the pool, we pulled them, go ahead, Jeff, sorry.
I'd like to clarify that GUHO is the construction manager and they are it. You guys have already approved them.
Okay, thanks.
And they're in charge of the subcontractors on site.
Okay.
So,
And if I could throw this out there and just take it from my prior life as a fire chief, this is training we can't get anywhere else. So the city staff, there's a benefit to being able to have these guys go in there and install sewer lines, install water lines. It's not something we get to do on a day-to-day basis. So I see that as a positive for the staff.
And that is absolutely the job and responsibility of our city public works, even though we contract it out sometimes.
Well, big projects, yeah, we contract out the project we're doing in Kimball subdivision, yeah.
Well, you call it training, but we're still fully trained
Absolutely.
and certified to get it done.
Absolutely, but again, back to the fire chief and me, my firefighters were fully trained and certified. They're some of the best firefighters in the nation. We still trained every day.
Sure.
And this is, I look at that in that same light.
Meeting adjourned.
Hey, folks, you missed out at yelling at, you could yell at a state legislator right now. There he is.